This is the Kawasaki Ninja 500 and it is a very expensive motorcycle. Ideally, this bike should have replaced the Ninja 400 in the market, and the Ninja 400 should have actually replaced the Ninja 300 many years ago. I actually cannot imagine why would somebody buy a Ninja 300 in today's day and age because it is such an old motorcycle. I also cannot imagine why Kawasaki India would sell the Ninja 300 in our country and deprive the enthusiasts of a new motorcycle, because ideally what they could have done is that they should have localized a lot of the components on this bike to price it at an accessible point in the same way that they did with the Ninja 300. Because if you are in the market for a good middleweight motorcycle, this Ninja 500 makes quite a strong case for itself. Let me tell you why.
I got the power.
Let's get straight to the business end of this motorcycle, shall we? With emission norms getting stricter by the day, Kawasaki had no option but to bump up the displacement. But that's not all.
This new parallel twin engine is the star of the show here. Unlike the Ninja 400's engine that was quite rev hungry, this engine has a meatier mid-range and a wider spread of torque. Now that translates to better rideability. So when you're riding in the city, you could stick the gearbox in 4th gear and ride without any complaints from the engine. At the same time, once you start feeding in the revs, this engine starts feeling more and more alive. The turn of speed gets quite entertaining.
I'd still classify the little buzz as a niggle because the performance of the engine is such that it makes you forget about its teeny tiny negatives. Keep the throttle pinned and before you know it, you ventured far beyond the 100 kmph mark. It is actually quite refined at 120 kmph, which is a quick enough highway pace given our road conditions. Speaking of, the engine heat management is very efficient and it doesn't mind being subjected to the pressure of dealing with a typical Indian traffic jam. And for those concerned about fuel consumption, the bike returns 28.7 kmpl in the city during our test.
Now it doesn't sound like a very loud motorcycle, but it's quite loud when you take it up to the red line. And this is what the motorcycle sounds like. At idle. And at the top. The motorcycle's trellis frame and suspension work harmoniously to offer a lot of confidence to the rider when you're pushing this bike around corners. The thing that's really stood out for me was the effortlessness of the steering, the way this motorcycle tips into the corner. And once you're in the corner, the stability and the sense of feedback that you get is absolutely superb. As for the Dunlop tires, they offer good feedback and grip over most of the well-paved tarmac that you'll encounter, as well as few lumpy surfaces. But when you're riding over Mumbai's concrete roads and mastic asphalt, they do not inspire a lot of confidence.
The ride quality is good for the most part and the suspension managed to absorb a variety of poor road surfaces without upsetting the stability of the bike. This despite the fact that the bike gets a telescopic fork unlike the USD fork on its competition, the Yamaha R3 and the Aprilia RS 457. Even the monoshock on the bike in stock settings works very well, but you must consider raising the preload if you want to carry a pillion that weighs over 70 kilos. Even the brakes are good enough, but can do with a little more bite and feedback while braking hard. The Ninja 500 looks good from most angles, and I like the fact that Kawasaki has made the Ninja 500 appear like an evolution of the Ninja 400. It looks sharper, sleeker, and more purposeful as a super sport ought to. That said, I wish Kawasaki had launched the Ninja 500 SE in India, as it looks rather fetching in the Kawasaki racing team colors. The black paint on a test bike hides the cuts and creases on the fairing to quite an extent, and also doesn't help the road presence of the bike. As for the features, you've got an LED headlight and a tail light, dual channel ABS, and a basic looking LCD display with Bluetooth connectivity. It is a sore point in my eyes and doesn't belong on a bike that costs over Rs 6 lakh on road. Which brings us to the biggest bone of contention.
The Ninja 500 is quite a likable motorcycle. I think things that really stand out for me are its design, the engine, its performance, and its easy handling. It actually hurts me to say that Kawasaki India's decision to bring this bike as a CBU to our country has deprived a lot of enthusiasts of a good motorcycle at an accessible price point. What Kawasaki India needs to do is show more commitment to this segment, localize a lot of the parts, price this motorcycle sensibly, because it is a very, very good motorcycle.